Good morning, students. Question number 3. Where in the world is Mrs. Barrett?
What do you see in the background?
I can't wait to see who comes up with it. Let's jump into chapter 19. The mercury was always swarming during the late afternoons and nights, but when I went in that morning, the crowd was sparse. Not many people there. Despite the early hour, the glass chandeliers were already lit. Huge wall-sized mirrors were polished, there to make everything bigger and brighter. Behind drinking counters were shelves set against walls, displaying a great number of liquor bottles, as well as glass jars full of free peppermints. The air smelled of whale oil fumes, which mingled with the odor of whiskey and stale tobacco. It made me wrinkle my nose. Grazie. It was almost impossible to believe this place had been a ship, not unlike the Stephanie K, in which I had come to California. Yet its transformation was so like San Francisco. There were multiple roulette and billiard tables, as well as gambling tables covered with green cloth, behind which, though it was just morning, sat professional gamblers. Around these men were stacks of coins and piles of gold dust, worth, Thad had told me, as much as $5,000. Anytime we hear about money in this book, I have to remember when she was in Providence, she was making 10 cents an hour. So while maybe it doesn't seem like that much for somebody to gamble with, I think it sounds like a lot. It's even more considering wages at that time. The money was there to tempt miners to try their luck at games of chance. During crowded times, enthusiastic men would line up 3, 4 deep, shoving forward so they could place bets. There were just as many stumbling the other way who, having become abruptly impoverished, run out of cash, had faces that were maps of misery. If I had learned anything about San Francisco, it was this. The men might have been in a fever to get gold, but they were just as feverish to wager it away. As I stood in the middle of the long hall, the ship's hull, and observed the entire sparkly place, I saw no sign of Jacob. But I did notice that on the stage in the back, where musicians performed, a solitary Negro boy was sitting in a chair, playing a brass-keyed bugle. The melody was that sad, I often think of riding home, which I recognize as the one Jacob had been whistling. Willing to make any connection to my brother, I wandered back to the stage. I thought the bugler was somewhat the same age as I, skinny like me, with coffee-colored skin and bushy, curly hair. He wore frayed trousers and a flannel shirt, somewhat large for him. The cuffs rolled back over thin wrist. Boots. Though his face was narrow, his cheeks, as he played, bulged like chicken eggs. I like that description. That really brings to mind how they were puffing out. His fingers were long and slender and moved with great assurance over the keys, bringing forth the song with a smooth, melancholy tone. As I stood there, dressed for work, which is to say, not in my feminine attire, looking and listening to him play, I was sure he noticed me, but he didn't do or say anything. "Good morning," I finally called. The boy, without stopping his playing, glanced over to me and gave no more than a bob to his instrument to acknowledge my presence. It was only when I continued to stand there that he abruptly stopped playing, lowered his bugle, and considered me with angry eyes, as if to say I was interrupting him. Though I suspected he wished I would go away, I chose to take advantage of his pause as a chance to say something. Do you play in the band? I asked. He lifted his horn as if to say that were obvious. The tune you were playing. I often think of writing home. My brother likes it. His face softened a little. Okay, he said without emotion. My name is Victoria Blaisdell. Tori. After a moment, he gave a nod. Samuel Nichols. Sam. What part of the States do you come from? I asked. In San Francisco, when you met people, that was the way friendly conversations most often started. He hesitated before saying, New York State. You? Rhode Island, I said, pleased that the Yankee connection gave us something in common. They were both from the North. They were Yankees. Were you playing here last night? His look grew wary. What if I was? It's my younger brother, I said. Jacob. He's gone off somewhere. I don't know where, so I'm searching for him. Since he likes music, and that song you were playing was his favorite, I thought he might have been here last night, and you saw him. A lot of people here last night. What's he look like? I described Jacob. The boy was silent for a moment, and then said, Last night, a kid like that was standing right where you are, watching and listening to me play that tune. When I stopped, he went off. Here at last was news. Do you have any idea where? I asked with eagerness. Sam shook his head. All I do is make music. As if to make his point, he turned from me, lifted his bugle, and began to play that melody again. I often think of writing home. I took it to mean he was not going to say more. Though frustrated, I said, Thank you, and turned away, uncertain where I should go next. All I could think to do was to go back up the hill and wait. I had almost reached the Mercury's front doors when a man stepped in front of me, blocking my way. With his high stovepipe hat, he loomed over me. He was a tall man, his face shaped like the letter V. With a trim dark beard, an elegant jacket with a black cravat, like a tie, and a white collar. His long nose brought to mind a blackbird or a crow. I took him to be one of the professional gamblers. Yes, miss. What brings you here? He demanded, as if he had the right to know. Though I thought him ill-mannered, at least he recognized me as a girl. Yes, sir, I said. I'm looking for my brother. That's a fact. What's he look like? I described him. A kid. 10. He frowned. A little young to be here, isn't he? But nope, can't say I ever saw him. What makes you think he was here? That boy. I pointed to the back of the saloon and Sam, the bugler. He told me he saw him. The man glanced toward the stage, and then he turned back to me with unfriendly eyes. I was here all last night, he said, and I didn't see anyone like you described. Now you can trust me, or you can trust that colored kid. Hate to tell you, he's not one for speaking the truth much. Anyway, I don't think a girl should be in here. You better move on out. Not only were his words offensive, but the way he spoke and studied me was intimidating. I almost blurted out what I thought. I trust the boy before you. But I decided I'd better leave. In any case, the man, whoever he was, had told me to go. Thank you, sir, I managed to say. The man stepped aside and allowed me to move toward the entry. I had no idea who he was, but as I walked away, I belatedly realized that he had a pelican feather attached to his jacket lapel. It was just like the one Father had given Jacob. Oh my goodness, guys. Should we go on and jump into chapter 20? Let's do chapter 20. It's not too long. Chapter 20. No sooner did I leave the Mercury than I considered returning and asking that man about the feather. But he had made me feel uncomfortable. And I took him for a bully. What some people call a ring-tailed roarer. I have never heard that term. Then, making excuses, I told myself there were a million pelican feathers around. It was simpler, easier, not to go back. Besides, I was feeling somewhat reassured. That bugler, Sam, had seen Jacob in the Mercury last night. I took it to confirm that at least my brother had not signed on, which I had not truly thought possible, with that Panama-bound ship, the Yankee Sword. Not sure what to do next. I thought the only other place worth looking for Jacob was atop Goat Hill, where he often went to watch for Mother's ship's arrival. But heavy rain had started again, and I could not imagine him sitting amidst that soak. In any case, I decided to go back to the tent in hopes he'd return. Struggling to stay free of mud, crowds, and scattered rubbish, I hurried uphill toward home, all the while telling myself that worry was ridiculous. And yet I did worry. For let it be admitted, it was my growing sense that I had failed in my responsibilities toward Jacob. That made me uneasy. It was as if I, in some fashion, had caused his wandering off. I had spent the day away from him and come back from my trip down bay with Thad late. Yet I hastily reminded myself the cause was the broken oar, not me. Still, when something bad happens and you think it might be your fault, it always seems worse. Have you guys ever felt that way? When something bad happens and you think you might have caused it, whether you meant to or not, it does make you feel bad. Dispirited, by the time I reached our tent, I had built up hopeful expectations that Jacob would be there. A quick look inside told me he had not returned. Dispirited, troubled anew, I sat on one of our beds. The more I thought about it, the more upset I became. It may have been bothersome to always look after Jacob, but it was quite another to have him disappear. I reminded myself, in charge of him. Yes, a sibling can be annoying, but there's no one you love more. To ease my tension, I told myself this was just a small mystery. A mystery called, where was Jacob? Did I not like enigmas? The unknown? Was not the sky suitably gray and low? Like a description in the book, it fit the moment. That is to say, I told myself this would be a modest puzzle. I should embrace it, solve it quickly. Jacob, I said aloud, please come back. I went across to the cafe. Did you find Jacob, Corderita? Senor Rosales called out as soon as he saw me. Two men dressed like miners were standing at his wood plank counter eating. I shook my head. Have you seen him? No le he visto. I haven't seen him. Can I offer you some comida? Food now. Gracias. I stood at the serving counter as he gave me a cup of coffee and a slab of beef. I reached into my money belt. He held up his palm. Más tarde. Later, Corderita. When you find Jacob. Who's Jacob? Asked one of the men who'd been eating. In San Francisco, strangers talk to strangers all the time. My younger brother, I said. Where's he at? I don't know. Probably went to the diggings, said the man, as he put a pinch of gold grains into Senor Rosales' outstretched hand to pay for his meal. He's too young, I said, but I had not thought it before. Perhaps he had gone off to find father. It was something I could almost see him, out of frustration, attempting. Never too young to get rich, said the man. I heard tell yesterday of a 9-year-old boy digging along outside his old man up on the San Joaquin River, pulled up a $2,000 nugget. As the miners headed out, one of them paused and looked hard at me. Excuse me, are you a boy or a girl? A girl, I said, holding my head high. Nice to see one, he said, touching his hat with civility. Not that many around here. He started to leave, hesitated, and looked back. Married, ma'am? He said. No wish to be, I said, giving the answer I had learned to use. Hope you don't mind me asking, said the miner with a shy smile. Then he touched his hat in politeness again and left. Senor Rosales stood behind his counter, arms folded over his chest. You are distressed, Corderita, aren't you? Jacob has never gone like this, I answered. No idea where he would go? He talked of shipping out. Jacob? Nunca. Never. Or maybe he did go off to find father. Senor Rosales shook his head. Not without telling you. At the Mercury, there was a musician, a boy. From what he told me, Jacob had been listening to the music there last night. He must have been looking for me. Well then, ask that niño. I did. He said he had no idea where Jacob went. Preguntale otra vez. Perhaps he'll remember something else. People do. I suppose, I admitted. When I finished eating, I went back to our tent and decided to wait until Jacob returned. I took off my hat, smoothed back my hair, feeling how quickly it had become dirty again. Telling myself I should buy some soap at Thad's store, I pulled my hair around, braided it anew, and tried to be patient. Perhaps Senor Rosales was right. I should speak to that bugler boy again. Perhaps he had remembered something. Any hint as to where Jacob had gone would ease my worry. What if by then... then I reminded myself father was due back in 3 days. What if by then I could not find Jacob? The thought gave me a jolt of panic. Ignoring the rain and mud, I headed back to the Mercury. Uh-oh. I hope that guy who wasn't very nice last time isn't still there. Okay, I'm going to give you one more view of where I am. I'm going to stand up so you can see it a little better. That was clue number 3. Where in the world is Mrs. Barrett? So if you're following along and you want to participate, here's what I'm thinking. I think if you can, there's going to be 2 guesses for every one. So you could guess the type of place I am and then specifically what city I'm in. So the place I am and what city it is. That'll be 2, and you'll get 1 point for each answer. And then I think, I don't know, I'll come up with some sort of prize. What do you think about that? That'd be kind of fun. Okay, bye guys. I will see you for chapter 21 next time.